minutes?
Motion made.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any comments or correction to these minutes? All those in favor of accepting, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Minutes are accepted. The second item on the agenda is correspondence. We can handle these all together.
Sure.
Yeah. We have a memo of the town planner dated February 4th, 2019 regarding administrative subdivision approval. A1 Roofing and Construction LLC, Tingles LLC, and Rhode Island Nurseries, Inc., owners. Property fronting on Peckham Lane, Plat 124, lots 39, 105, and 106. Item B, an email correspondence from Mora Overland dated January 9th, 2019 regarding Atlantic Beach Hotel area. Item C, email correspondence from Josie Rock dated January 9th, 2019 regarding Atlantic Beach District. Item D, email correspondence from John Joven, 138 Esplanade, dated January 9th, 2019 regarding ABD hotels in our community. Item E, memo of John Bagwell, undated, regarding suggestions for an overlay district that would apply to the Atlantic Beach District. Item F, memo of the Concerned Island Taxpayers Association, undated, regarding suggested overlay zoning district recommendations for the Atlantic Beach District. Item G, email correspondence of Planning Board member Bill Nash, dated February 9th, 2019, regarding Atlantic Beach Overlay District. May I have a motion to receive these correspondence?
Motion made.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded to receive these correspondence. Is there any discussion?
I'd just like to make a comment that I really appreciate these correspondences from the community regarding the Atlantic Beach District. You know, as we move forward with more discussions about the Atlantic Beach District, it's really important to have this community input as part of our further considerations. So thank you, everyone who has let their voice be heard through their email correspondences.
Any other comments? All those in favor of receiving the correspondence, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Correspondence is received. The next item on the agenda is to just mention those items that will be continued tonight, so that if you are here for those items, you do not have to stay. The items that will be continued tonight are items 4A, 4B, 4C, 4E, 4F, 4G, fire protection only, and item 5. Item 4A.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. We've had a technical review meeting once, and as a result of that and the comments from Steve Cabral from Crossman Engineering, who represents the town, we're back making some revisions and putting together a design for a retention, detention concept area, drainage area for the house itself. That's in process. I've been down since Friday, so I have not been paying attention to things. Lynn Small was in the process of meeting with Mr. Horan to actually define what the footprint would be of any house that he would build, assuming that the subdivision were allowed, so that from that footprint she could design the drainage system. I'm not too sure where they are with that, but that's in process, and it will be submitted to the Technical Review Committee at the next scheduled meeting, which is yet to be determined.
So do you want to continue this to the next meeting?
Next meeting.
March 13th?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on this?
Matt Lees for Jeremiah and Lorna Schaefer, trustees who own property at 553 Tuckerman Avenue, which is directly abuts the property at 535 Tuckerman Avenue. That's the subject of the subdivision. We have no objection to the continuance. We'll review with our engineer the proposed stormwater management plan and take it up at the TRC at that time. So we'll reserve our comments on that until then.
Thank you.
Motion to continue this item until the 13th of March.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded to continue this item to the March 13th meeting. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The item is continued. Thank you. Item 4B. Public hearing, Prospect Avenue subdivision, Eugene Goldstein applicant request for combined preliminary and final plan approval for a proposed 8-lot major subdivision of property fronting on Prospect Avenue. The property is identified as Assessors Plat 121, NW Lot 66A, and is located approximately 0.3 miles to the east of the intersection of Prospect Avenue and Aquidneck Avenue. Is there anyone here to speak on it?
I've received correspondence from the applicant's attorney on this matter requesting that it be continued to the March meeting.
The March meeting, we have a motion to continue to
Motion
the
to
March
continue.
13th meeting.
Until March 13th.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor of the continuance, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Item is continued to March 13th. Item 4C, public hearing. Request of Brennan Realty LLC, Bernadette Realty LLC, and Mark Byrne Realty LLC for preliminary plan approval, including requests for waivers from certain provisions of the subdivision and land development regulations for a proposed 11-lot major subdivision of property fronting on Mitchell's Lane. Property is identified as 430 Mitchell's Lane, Assessors Plat 124, lots 13, 14, 14A, 15, and is located approximately 1,300 feet to the north of the intersection of Mitchell's Lane and Fayette Lane. Mr. Silver.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Robert Silver, I represent Brennan Realty LLC and the other entities that are part of this application. We likewise had a technical review committee review, same time as the Sheldon on the same morning, and there were some suggestions and revisions made to the plan, which Dupree Engineering is in the process of completing. I'd ask that we continue it for a month. We should be able to meet and clarify all those revisions with the TRC in the meanwhile.
Okay, may I have a motion to continue this to the March 13th meeting?
Motion to continue till March 13th.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to continue this item. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The item is continued to the March 13th meeting. Item 4E. For those who are interested, the reason we're continuing 4E, 4F, and the fire protection and 4G, as well as number 5, is because, as you've noticed, we only have 4 members here this evening, and these items are important enough that I feel we should have a full board, or at least as many as the town council will give us to discuss these items, so they will be continued. Item 4E, consideration of options for amendment to Middletown rules and regulations regarding the subdivision and development of land regarding pavement width. May I have a motion to continue this to the March 13th meeting?
Motion made.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion?
I had a couple of questions that I just wanted to put forward before we have our larger discussion. I just was wondering whether the pavement widths vary when there is or is not a sidewalk
Yes.
involved in the calculations?
I believe they do.
It does mention that? Okay, I just didn't see that in this.
Yes, I think so.
And it's up to the board and the town. If you want it to vary depending on whether there's a sidewalk,
Sidewalk or not.
that's up to you,
Yes.
yeah.
All right, so that's something that could be up for discussion. And then, you know, in the efforts, you know, around the state to address complete streets with bike lanes, I don't see bike lanes mentioned anywhere in this proposal, although in some of the comparatives, like in North Kingston, bike lanes are mentioned. as part of the calculations in some of the larger streets. So I would just like to put that out there in advance of this discussion, bike lanes and sidewalks and how they influence with.
Sure.
Can
Yep.
Kevin take a look at that?
We can add that to the discussion next time, yep.
Good.
Yep.
Good. Okay, very good. Any other discussion? All those in favor of continuing this item, say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The item is continued to the March 13th meeting. Item 4F. Consideration of a recommendation to the Town Council for creation of an Historic Preservation Commission and Voluntary Historic District with incentives. May I have a motion to continue this to the March 13th meeting?
Motion made.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of continuing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The item is continued to the March 13th meeting. Item 4G, dealing with fire protection. May I have a motion to continue that discussion to the March 13th meeting?
Motion made.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of continuing, say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. That aspect of that item is continued to the March 13th meeting. Number 5, discussion of potential amendments to the zoning ordinance, Article 27A, mixed-use development project. May I have a motion to continue this item to the March 13th meeting?
Motion made.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of continuance, say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The item is continued to the March 13th meeting. The next item on the agenda is discussion of priorities and process to complete draft proposed Atlantic Beach District overlay zoning district. I'd like to ask, how many people are here to hear this discussion on the Atlantic Beach District? And are there any of you who wish to speak? This is not a public hearing, but I'm willing to hear comments from the public at the end of our discussion if you're interested. Is there anyone interested in speaking? No?
Most of our comments have already been nailed in.
Well, we do have the emails, yes, so we have those.
But the public doesn't hear it, so you're saying it's
Yeah. Anyway, we'll ask at the end of discussion. You may hear something that you wish to comment on, but we will have time for comments. Okay, I'd like to open this up. We had the joint meeting with the town council, and a vision was put forth, which put forth again perhaps, been out there for quite a while. And it is the task of the planning board to take that vision and put it into ordinances so that the zoning will properly reflect what we want the vision to be. Is there anyone who would like to start the discussion on?
Well,
By the way, the purpose of what we need to do tonight is to establish the process we will follow as we go forward with this assignment. Art?
well, I think it's an important subject, obviously, and I have talked to Paul about this and also the planner, that I think we need to work in two different areas simultaneously. One is to review the zoning and start with the use tables. And what we'll do with that is set up subcommittees and so on. We've also got some very interesting ideas and thoughts from the woman whose name I can never remember, that
Ashley Medeiros.
Ashley Medeiros, who works in a effort that supports the Newport Chamber of Commerce. So we're kind of short-handed here, but we're going to get some more troops when the council provides some more members for us. So my thought is that we would have a subcommittee that will look at the zoning aspects of the overlay district and how we want it to look. And then also on the second part is to look at the something that we've been discussing for a long time, what the building should look like there. we always talk about the New England look. I'm not sure we all have the same vision of that, but I think we have some commonalities that should be done. So my thought is we would work in parallel in those two subcommittees. And I'm not sure how long that will take, but when we get done with that, the subcommittees report out to the full planning board. The planning board then has a series of public hearings so the public can listen to what the ideas have been put forth for the overlay district. And you can participate in the discussion saying, I don't like this, I do like it, and so on. So when we're all done with that discussion, we've taken the public input and put it into what the overlay district will look like. It will then go to the council for their discussion. Again, with a public hearing, they will have to hear that particular item twice. And if they like what they hear, it'll become an ordinance. So you'll have an Atlantic Beach district overlay for that particular area in those buildings.
EJ?
Yes, I'd like to just quote from this vision. And we have been discussing this for months, and I think we all up here understand, I think everyone up here understands what the people, you people who live in the area are feeling, and we're very, very sensitive to it. And that vision was to become a more pedestrian-oriented and attractive, vibrant commercial village, and to serve an influx of not only the seasonal people who come and go, but also the surrounding residential neighborhoods in the town. And I think that that is what we must do. And that's one of the reasons why we are so interested in everything that you all have said. You've come, you've made your points. We have walked down there ourselves. We understand the control that you all want for fewer, if any, hotels down there. And this is part of our putting together, hopefully, some ordinances that will last. Liz?
Yeah, I'd also just like to add that, you know, we do have the Atlantic Beach District Master Plan, which, you know, is a really comprehensive overview of the public hearings that have been had, some suggestions in terms of zoning, in terms of design, in terms of intention of this district. And I think this is a real opportune time for all of us to really go back and review that district master plan, you know, page by page. And we don't need to recreate and go back to ground zero on this. We have a lot of information that the community has weighed in on and been working on for the past couple of years. So I really sort of implore us all to really take a look at that master plan, pull out the salient points, and move forward with the use table review and the design reviews, and get those into ordinance form as soon as we possibly can. Because I think everybody here does feel as though we're reacting now to things that we don't want to see happen, as opposed to talking about what we do want to see happen. And you know, we can't change what is, but we certainly can work together to change what will be in that Atlantic Beach district, with the multitude of properties there that are still up for grabs in terms of what they will or might become. So I really look forward to this discussion and think that we've got a lot of tools in our toolbox that we just have to get out and put to work to make some good decisions here.
Any other comments?
How about we have
Well,
someone
I'd
who
like
might
to,
want to talk?
I'd like to propose a way forward. By the way, one of the items that was in our list of correspondence, I don't know if you've seen it, but it was an email correspondence from a member of the planning board who could not be here tonight and wanted to get his views on the table. He, in essence, I'm sorry, I have a cold and I'll do the best I can. Okay. Is that better?
Yes, that's much better. Thank you.
One of the pieces of correspondence that we received was an email from a member of the planning board who could not be here tonight, which is why we're down to 4, who wanted to have his views expressed at the meeting. In fact, he requested that it be read, and so I need to find it. Oh, thank you. This is from Bill Nash, and he wrote as follows. As I had indicated, I will not attend this Wednesday's meeting due to a work commitment. After reviewing the agenda and talking with Paul and Ron in his office the other day, I had another thought relative to agenda item 4D on the Atlantic Beach District issue. While I wholeheartedly support engaging the Use Table Subcommittee and forming another subcommittee to keep the process moving, I can't help but remember Bob Silver's comments relative to his experience telling us that the market will drive the development down there. So completely true. And something that should be given more consideration, that maybe a consultant should be engaged. As I drive all over New England for work, I view examples of good village development and failed development. I suggest that there are so many facets to our own potential village district that the town should absolutely engage planning experts over and above town staff, whom you know I support and have complete faith in but are limited in resources, to assist in this task. Paul is correct that the planning board has the vision, albeit with only 5 members. But we cannot do it all, and the expense of engaging a consultant should be considered and given as much weight as any subcommittee recommendations. Respectfully, I would request that you distribute this to the other planning board members for consideration. Apologies for not being at the meeting to reinforce my beliefs, and thanks for allowing me to put this out here. So he in essence is requesting that a market analysis be done of the area. While I think it's important to consider the market, because the market does to a large extent drive development, it's also true that markets change and market studies are not always 100% accurate. So my view is that we should proceed with 2 subcommittees as quickly as possible. Excuse me. My suggestion is that one of these committees be the current use subcommittee that Bill Nash chairs, and it should consider, and by the way, that subcommittee has been working specifically on the uses for limited business areas, which is exactly what the Atlantic Beach District is. So they're well on the way to dealing with the kinds of uses in limited business areas. As you note, we are member challenged right now, but Art has agreed to work with Bill, and Art is a very experienced planning board member. Bill knows zoning very well, so I think the 2 of them can deal with the use table very well. And part of the charge given to them is to incorporate the mixed use aspect to the use table. We heard a lot of discussion on how both retail, restaurants, retail shops, other shops should be incorporated into the Atlantic Beach District development, and that subcommittee will take on that challenge of getting that into the ordinances. The other subcommittee will cover the other 2 things that Peter Regan identified as being critical. The dimensional requirements and the design requirements for any development, or new development or redevelopment in the Atlantic Beach area. I've asked Liz to chair that subcommittee, and she's agreed to do so. And BJ has agreed to serve on that, and I will serve on that subcommittee also. And it is the task of this subcommittee to get all of the dimensional and design requirements that are desired in the Atlantic Beach District into the ordinances. This is not an easy challenge, but it's what we need to do if we want to get the vision into the ordinances. And I'd like to ask Ron if you would send out doodles to schedule meetings for both of these subcommittees, and see if you can schedule 2 for each of them. I think we have to move this along quickly.
Yep.
So try to schedule 2 for each of the subcommittees. Okay. Is there any other discussion, members of the planning board? Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak? Yes.
Hi, Teresa Spangler, 1111 Wapping Road. I just have a quick question about the subcommittees. Are you, in these subcommittees, are people from the area going to be able to be included?
Thank you for
In that-
saying that. I meant to say that these are working subcommittees of the planning board, and as such, it's for planning board discussion. However, all of the subcommittees I've been involved with so far, it's up to the chairperson to allow the public to participate, and I'm sure that's how these will proceed going forward. They're certainly open meetings, so the public is welcome to attend, and if the chairperson of that subcommittee wishes, you can participate.
Okay.
Okay? Thank you for reminding
And,
me.
and if the chairperson doesn't allow that?
Speak up.
Okay. And then,
It's up to them, though. You have to understand that.
so in the process of adjusting ordinances
Also, keep in mind that once they do their work, it'll all come back to the planning board.
and then there's a public hearing?
Okay, and
Right.
we'll probably have a public workshop before we have a hearing.
Okay.
Okay, so there'll be ample time for the public to participate. All I'm saying is, as these subcommittees deliberate and work out the nitty-gritty details, the public is welcome to attend, and if the chairperson wishes, participate.
Okay. I just personally, from some of my experiences that I've dealt with in the past year and a half, it's difficult as a resident to not be able to be part of the process and actually be, yes, we're heard, but are we listened to? And and with you folks, you are very open and you do listen, and it's wonderful. And with the zoning board, yes, they listen as well. I just think it's difficult that if there's abutters who don't agree with something, that they have to go get legal advice and engineering advice and have to pay out of pocket to be able to have them, quote, testify to the boards in order to actually be, have any validity to what they have to say with their concerns or some facts. And I think at some point our community needs to allow residents not to get up and rant. I certainly respect that because everybody's time is valuable. But I do think it is important that residents, when we are the taxpayers and we're supporting this community, that we should be able to, if we do have factual information, that information should be considered valid as well. I don't know how that's ever going to change in this community, but you know, I just think that is an important part of the process at some point because we are the ones living it. And if we're run out of town, then who's going to be living here? You know?
I'd like to say something about that. That is a narrow definition from a lawyer, saying a citizen is not an expert witness. If you live next door to something that's happening, by God, in my definition, you're an expert witness. You don't need to go to 3 years of law school or to be defined by some trade or profession to be an expert witness.
I agree with you completely, but I have to be totally honest with you. I was told by the zoning board that anybody that gets up and testifies, that the lawyers could take that to Supreme Court or Superior Court, I forgot which one. And because they weren't expert witnesses and they were only residents, their information was not taken into consideration at all.
Well, let me give you an example from me.
Isn't that discouraging? I promise you that was told standing here at this podium and off the podium.
A couple of months ago, we had an application come before us for a gas station at the corner of East Main and Aquinic Avenue. And I was concerned about this project. I have empirical evidence of driving through that for about 15 years with my daughter going to grade A in the high school and everything else and knowing what the traffic problem was. So I consider myself a layman expert witness in that particular case. And that's how I look upon, I've always looked upon when I sat up in here, whatever role I had, about when people speak before us on their opinions and concerns. So I hope nobody feels short-sighted that they're not expert witness.
I appreciate your
So
comment.
I'm not sure
Thank
that's
you,
going
Art.
to fly with our attorney here, but that's just my 2 cents.
Well, my view on this is I will listen to any resident who wishes to speak, if they do start to present themselves as an expert, I will at least ask them for their credentials, which I think are important. But I will listen to them. Of course, we listen to them.
Well, and the planning board is good about that, and I know that citizens greatly appreciate that, residents appreciate that, because we make the town. We as residents all make the town, so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Were you
you.
going to say something, Khadija?
I was just going to say pretty much what Art said, that we all feel that we've had experiences throughout our life where we consider ourselves expert witnesses, in quotes. And that's why we're interested in listening to anyone who comes up and has a presentation to make. And as Paul said, he may ask, what is your background? Why are you so interested in this particular topic? But I can understand, we're just a different board from the zoning board.
Well, thank you.
I'll leave it at that.
Well, we're all serving Middletown. Let's not forget that. Okay. Yes.
Hi, good evening. Judith Rosenthal, 99 Shore Drive. I think you probably know my name by now.
We need
Good
it for the
evening.
record.
Pardon?
We need it for the record anyway.
Yes, I know. I'm just curious, especially for the dimensions and design committee that you talk about, how will you either gather your information, or what is the goal of that committee that will then come and present whatever it is at a public hearing?
I will take a stab at that. From the standpoint of designing an ordinance, there would be certain requirements in terms of materials, roof lines, setbacks, a number of elements that might have further definition in the Atlantic Beach District area, so that where we would probably discourage waivers being given to those, or let it be known that waivers will be difficult to get from these design standards. I think it's a matter of really starting to put together guidelines that are part of an ordinance so that they must be adhered to.
Okay, and
Is that
Yeah.
fair enough?
Let me add to that, okay? We have the current ordinances. They have certain specifications, as Liz mentioned, in terms of setback distances, roof height, et cetera. We've already made a change in the limited business area where all structures on properties that abut residential areas can now only be 35 feet high instead of the 40 feet that were allowed before. We've also made changes to the ordinance for development in the flood zone, which limits the height of structures in the flood zone. So we've addressed those two areas. We've also already received, in this list of correspondence that we got tonight, some very good suggestions from citizens that we can consider. Things dealing with, as Liz mentioned, the roof shape or something else. Okay. And so we'll start with things like that, and I'm sure once we get into the discussion, we'll go deeper and deeper.
okay, and thank you. One more thing, would it be unreasonable if there could be a timeline, an end date to all of this? I mean, I feel like it's been going on and on.
Yeah. Well, it has been going on
since the moratorium, since we asked for the moratorium, that's when all this kind of began, and that was a while ago. Yeah. So
it has been going on and on. The town council has expressed very clearly that they're not interested in a moratorium. We will move as hastily as we can. I think you heard me request Ron to schedule 2 meetings for each subcommittee. We're always torn between doing something quickly and doing something right.
I understand.
And so we will combine those two and do the best we can.
Okay.
Ron, what year was it that we finalized and had the Atlantic Beach Master Plan approved by the council?
2007.
2007. So I've got to be frank here. I think nobody paid much attention to it until recently. We looked back at this development and came up with an innovative way to finance some really good additions and changes to it. So and then things have kind of accelerated through development there, but it hadn't been since 2007. We didn't do much on development down there. But the plan was sitting there. So that's kind of where we are. And believe me, everybody's as anxious as you are to get to the finish line.
And the key, as I think you understand, is to get that vision into the ordinances. That's the key. And that's what we're working on. Okay.
Now, Ron, if I'm not incorrect, a long time ago, we were thinking about having a town center. We don't have a town center. We're all over the place. And we thought it might be around here someplace. So we came up with, we didn't come up with ordinances, we came up with guidelines. And guidelines, every time Burger King or McDonald's or somebody comes in here, they want to do something that the national company says is appropriate for their store. And we have to tell them, well, we have these little guidelines. And we don't need any more guidelines. I think we've got to get a little bit tougher and have an ordinance that says this is what you can use when you build it. You can't have a flat roof, etc. So instead of having these shaky little guidelines, we'll have an ordinance, and we need to be careful about granting waivers after we're happy with what that design's going to be.
Well, I was just going to suggest that they're more than guidelines. They are regulations within the town's land development regulations. The issue is the request, often you get requests for waivers, and as Liz suggested, reevaluation of those waiver requests is probably a good idea.
Yeah.
Yes, this is one thing that I wanted to say. I think that waivers need to be a question of hardship for the developer, and he has to prove that it's a hardship. We have a lot of waivers that we are asked to give that really don't seem to be hardships. They're just part of a design that the developer wants to do. And I think we've got to pay more attention and ask them, well, what kind of a hardship is this waiver that you're asking us to give?
And it's interesting, I think, when putting together, these ordinances, there's real intention on the part of the planning board for what the intended results of that ordinance are going to be. And so when waivers are then requested, you can really say, well, that was not the intention of this ordinance, so
yes,
we will not grant that waiver. So we're trying to be more thoughtful and to be consistent and to be able to make decisions that then can be passed on to the zoning board for them to be upheld because they are ordinance, not just guidelines.
Anton Viveris, 110 Indian Hill Road. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. We talk about expert witnesses. If a resident feels that something isn't right for the town, and they do their due diligence, they do their research, and they bring their research before the board, any board, I think it should be listened to. Okay. They may not have a license in engineering, but they've done their research on a particular project, and they're bringing it forward for your information, and I think it should be taken into consideration as any others. Another thing, as I'm listening to, as of the council meeting on the January 22nd, and again at the meeting on the 4th, when the boards met and suggestions were made, and the attitude was that we're going to make the suggestions, we know better than you. I just wanted to, and that the comprehensive plan is an advisory document, and the planning board's an advisory board. Well, the document is a mandate from the state, and the board also. So they're more than just advisories. I was asked a question on the 28th at the zoning board meeting by Mr. Gambrell, if the comprehensive plan and the zoning was in conflict, what trumps? And I said that it was the zoning. But I've done a little research, and I've come up with that the comprehensive plan has been referred to as a guide or a vision. What I found is that it's a state mandate. The comp plan has guidelines and visions, goals, and action items. The state of Rhode Island does mandate the execution of the goals and action items. The comprehensive plan is not just a guide or a vision, but a mandate by the state of Rhode Island. This must be why one of the findings for a special use permit in Middletown zoning code, chapter 152, paragraph 902 says, a use categorized as a special use in Article 6 and elsewhere in the chapter shall be permitted by the zoning board following a public hearing if, in the opinion of the board, such use in its proposed location meets the following requirements, finding in number 3 reading. It will be compatible with the comprehensive plan of the town of Middletown. In Rhode Island General Law, Title 45, City and Towns, Chapter 24, Section 42, General Provisions for Special Use Permit, Item B3 states, the town special use ordinance shall establish criteria for the issuance of each category of special use permit that shall be in conformance with the proposals and intent of the comprehensive plan and the zoning ordinance of the city or town. Criteria for issuance of special use permits shall be in conformance with both the comprehensive plan and the zoning ordinance equally. So the comprehensive plan and what it says and what the zoning says should be given the same weight. In Middletown, the criteria for issuance of special permit to be conformance with both the comp plan and zoning ordinance includes 5 findings. The findings related to property value, nuisance, and injury to the appropriate use of the surrounding area or district, hazardous conditions, and being compatible with the comp plan. So I won't go on any farther than this, but I just want to make it that, you know, your ordinary residents who are concerned about the town, and you don't have to be involved in politics or the operation of the town to be concerned about it. Do your research and bring it forward, and it should be adopted just like a lawyer standing here with a developer trying to get the board to give them a special use permit. When you have a regular resident that comes forward and did a zoning and says, just a minute, according to whatever section or statute that they quote, I think that should be considered and looked at. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I say something? No, I want to make a comment. Thank you. Just in response, I'm very willing to listen to anyone who brings their research forward. Oftentimes, people come before the board without their research making statements. There I have a problem, and there I will request credentials. Certainly, if they present their research, it should be examined. With respect to the equality of the comprehensive plan and the zoning ordinances, I would ask you to please talk to the town solicitor. I can only tell you what he tells us, and that is zoning wins. Okay? And the third comment I'd like to make is the town council gave us a list of items to address that came out of the action plan for the comprehensive plan. There was a total of 11 items on that list. The planning board has now addressed 8 of them and is working on 2 of the others, and we're making progress. So we're aware of that, and we're working hard to deal with it. Okay, thank you.
I really want to be clear about what I'm going to tell you. I have gone through 2 comprehensive plans sitting on this board. The first one was back in the early 2000s, and we did a comp plan. Nothing in the town changed relative to zoning. The zoning changes that were recommended in the comp plan never took place. And that happened in the other 49 countries in this state. So state law changed. Now, we did the second comp plan here a couple of years ago. State law mandates that if there are changes that in the comp plan, in the zoning, it must be brought into compliance with the comp plan within 1 year. So you're not going to have, theoretically, at the zoning board, a conflict between zoning and comp plan. Now, the state doesn't enforce it, and that's good, because you can't get everything done in 1 year. But I'm telling you, this board has worked very hard to bring every zoning alteration in the comp plan into compliance with that plan, so we avoid those particular conflicts. So,
Actually, I'd like to get the discussion back to the Atlantic Beach District, which is what this agenda item is.
Just one sentence.
One sentence, go ahead.
Just want to say, reference to that, the state had to change the comprehensive plan prevailing to zoning code prevailing, because zoning code is bound to legal system. It's part of the legal system, whereas the comprehensive plan is not. So making the zoning code prevail keeps the state out of court. That was the basic. I questioned that myself. I said, what was the problem? Apparently, it was a legal problem. So to take care of that, they swapped it.
Thank you. Yes.
I'd like to say good evening. My name is David Rushlow. I reside at 32 Ellery Avenue in Middletown. I would just like to say one thing to bring it up on what an expert is. An expert, in the definition of an expert, yes, like you say, you can go to school, go to college and everything, and you get your experience. I was here talking the other night in front of the town council, and all of a sudden, Attorney Montland, I was just bringing up points, not claiming to be an expert. The only thing I have is I've had in my field, in construction, I've had 45 years in the construction field. I built prisons, I built schools, I built high-rises. My education is working in the field. I believe I've always had chances to take and move from the field into the office area, but in my 45 years, I've never elected. I didn't want to do it. I want to be out in the field where the men is, where it's getting built. And when he come up and said, you're not an expert. No, I've only got 45 years experience. What is your experience in the field? Have you been out in the field and see how it's put together? The results of failures? Even today, what happened when you really look at it, that, like I say, when I look at it, there's 3 sets of people. There's the engineers, it's the architects, and the tradesmen. The architect designs the building. The engineer makes it work. The tradesman puts it together and builds it. And when you're out there in the field, the best laid plans of mice and men doesn't always work. We can see a prime example of what happened in Massachusetts. Massachusetts was a big dig. Okay, we get all the engineers and all the architects, we put them all together, and they say, this is what's going to work. This is going to be the greatest thing ever. Millions and millions and millions of dollars. And what have we got? Yesterday, Boston, #1 for the most congested, unorganized city in the country. That's what you get. We can even go to a small little plan. I'll take locally, Second Beach. Okay, now we go down to Second Beach. What do we got down there? Okay, What we want to do is we want to put in a filtration system to make the beach safer. I surf just about every day. I love the beach. It's part of my life. It's in my soul. I go down there and see what they're doing down there. That thing is a complete failure. I look at it like, who engineered this? I have no idea. It's not working. They go down there. When I went down one day to surf, I go out there. What's down there? But a 10-wheeler, 5 guys out there working, and an excavator. And they're digging up the sand. I'm going, what's the matter with the sand? Oh, it's container. We're going to dig it up. How often do you have to do this? Oh, well, you know, we don't, he didn't want to say. The whole thing is that's what it reflects back with that plan. They can go to the simple thing of over at our police station where we have a monument for the police officers. What do we do with it? We put the monument on the ground. That's like me with everybody that I lost in Vietnam and take and put the Vietnam Wall on the ground. And I can walk on it and see their names. What a foolish thing that was. That was $30,000, $40,000. Gone. What we did down there at Second Beach, gone. We really have to think of what we're doing. I think we're headed in the right avenue. We really are. But we had Attorney Silva say the other day that what basically dictates what everything's being used for is money, and it's true. It is. I mean, if I had a piece of property down there, money dictates it. But what does also dictate it is what the land can be used for, the ordinance on it, everything like that dictates what it can be. If I own that property down there and I know it can't be zoned for a hotel, my value, I have to realize what my value's worth. It's just like your houses. Your houses are worth certain values from what they are, how many rooms, everything like that. So that's what dictates it. It's not just money. I'm just having a real tough time with it. I love this town. I've been in front of you before and told you how much I love the town. I think we're headed in the right direction. I hope we maintain that. We want to get on this as much as we can to make this what it can be. And like I always use the term, and I've said it to you before, what we create here, we can't go back. I just happened to bring some pictures. I was preparing for another meeting that was canceled last night because of the weather, naturally. But when we're looking at, like, in my field, which being, my main field was mechanical contracting, engineering, that I look at the buildings that we want to put in down there. It's unbelievable. It is totally unbelievable. I can just show you this. I wasn't really prepared for this, but you can just pass this around just to show what's really good, because you can look at drawings, okay? You look at all your architectural drawings and everything you want, all your mechanicals and everything. It's good to look at the colored photos, what the building's going to look like and what you got. This is what you're going to get. This right here is just pictures that were taken in the Bedford of a mill. And that's the picture of Hotel 6. That's what you get. Does that look like it belongs at the beach? That is so far from what it's supposed to look like, for having a beach, to make it look like we want it to look. If we want it to look like New Bedford, fine. But I'm just saying, give it all the thought you can. I know there's a lot of pressure on you.
We are.
I know, and I'm just saying, that's why I'm with you, and I see we're going in the right direction, but we just got to be so careful. And the idea of, just one more thing I want to add, it scares the living heck out of me, is the idea of what we have going on down there so close to a water source. I brought this up the other day. I've never seen some stuff like this going in so close to a water source. They're talking about pavers and everything, permeable paving and everything like that. There's different elevations. Pervious pavers are only supposed to be used in no more than 5%, grades. These people, the pervious paver is not the answer solution. That water table is 16 inches below the ground. 16 inches. Some of that pervious paving, when you have to build it, you have to have 3 feet.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but
I know.
we
I know.
really have to focus our discussion on going forward.
Okay, and I appreciate the time. I just wanted to say thank you for going in the direction you're going, and I hope we continue that way. And if there's anything I could ever do for anything, I'd love to do it.
Thank you. BJ, you want to say something?
Yes, basically what I wanted to say is something that I've said before. Sometimes what is lacking is common sense. And this is something that you're talking about, is common
Right.
sense. And for many people, common sense may be an expert testimony.
Yeah.
And that's what bothers me when I hear so much floating on and around and about. I don't see the common sense in it.
Right.
So I thank you very much for your bringing us down to reality.
Well, I think you're in reality. You've got a tough job. There's no doubt about it. And I just want to say, thank you for what you're doing. And I appreciate it. And I hope you just continue to make this what it can be. Beautiful little village.
No, we hope
Thank you.
so.
We're trying. By the way, experience counts as credentials. Anyway.
I agree.
You have you're going to do the polling to set up the
Yes.
subcommittee meetings. Let me ask this question. Bill raised the question of a market analysis. Is there anyone who would like to comment on that?
I think that a market analysis is not necessary at this point because that's kind of saying that the market is what's driving our decision-making on what's going to happen in our own backyard. And I believe that that will add months and months and months to this process that we really, I think the collective here wants to get this moving along as quickly as possible. And plus we do have resources in hand that can help us make wise decisions.
Well, I concur. Market
Right here.
analysis, when you haven't completed a updated and revised use table, is a waste of time. You can say, well, a market analysis says you can put 6 gas stations in there. And in the use table, there are no gas stations. So I think you need to, the old thing about the cart before the horse, I think works in this particular analysis.
BJ?
Yes, we have something in front of us that says the current business makeup of the Aquidneck Beach District. 7 professional-administrative educational services, 10 food services, 1 arts entertainment/rec, 7 accommodations, 3 retail trades, and 1 gas station. And that apparently is the current makeup that is there now. And that gives us an idea of what to work with or about.
Well, my view is that a market analysis, as I said before, is of limited value at this point. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong, and as we know, markets can change. Right now, our goal, by our, I mean the planning board, our goal is to get the vision for the Atlantic Beach District into the ordinances. That is our charge, that is what we need to do. So, is there any other discussion on this? Okay, move on to the next item.
We have to make a motion then?
Do we have to?
No.
No,
Okay,
not
good.
okay. The next item is 4G. Consideration of possible amendments to the Middletown Rules and Regulations regarding the subdivision and development of land regarding exterior building materials for commercial buildings. Ron, can you introduce that, please?
Sure. So at prior meetings, we've had discussion about various potential amendments to the regulations to address concerns that have arisen. As you know, one of the concerns that we talked about was the issue of the exterior materials that are permitted within the regulations. It specifically calls out wood, stone, brick as being the acceptable materials, but as you know, oftentimes in a commercial business setting, in the design that is done for a commercial building, synthetic materials that very closely mimic those traditional building materials are available to the designers. Those materials are better able to stand up to weather, they're less maintenance intensive, and they oftentimes request that the board address or allow those synthetic materials to be used, and it's things like the hardy plank, which is a synthetic or a cement board that once it's painted, if you didn't know it was a cement board, you would think it was wood. It looks basically the same as a wood clapboard or even shingles. So as we discussed, the regulations now require a waiver to be granted by the planning board to allow those materials. The board, in our discussions, felt that it would be appropriate to allow those materials, provided that they are, as we've seen in prior cases, closely mimicking what the natural materials would look like. So that's what this proposed revision to the regulations would do, would be to allow those synthetic materials, subject to review by staff. If the staff feels that the materials that are being proposed are not, at least in our opinion, close enough to what the natural materials would look like, then it would go to the planning board for consideration if the applicant wished to pursue a waiver. So that's basically what this proposed revision would do.
Any comment?
Yeah, I was just thinking about one of a recent application where somebody came in with and proposed a synthetic material that was a shingling material, and it was basically sort of odd-shaped sheets of shingles. And in my heart of hearts, I really felt as though it was did not really mimic the natural elements that we required in the ordinance. So I think it's difficult sometimes for the planning board to be put in a position where we're making value judgments on the quality of the materials, not necessarily being in the building trades industry. So with that now, in this revision, we're looking to take that determination back to the planning staff to make the determination whether it's an acceptable substitute, right?
Right.
So it's out of the planning board's hand. But I would just implore the staff to make sure that the quality of what's being presented is really good quality,
yeah,
and not a Lego version of
yeah.
building
And
materials.
I would suggest that in those situations where the staff is looking at a material, unless it's something that we're all familiar with, for example, the hardy plank, which I think we're all very well aware of and how that looks. If it was, I think, any question at all on the staff, at least on my part, as to whether or not the material was appropriate, I would refer it to the planning board and let you all decide.
Thank you.
Well, very often, we have had various materials presented to us for our value judgments. And some we've agreed with, and some we haven't.
Right.
But at least we've got to see what it looks like and touch it.
Yeah, so I mean, really what this is doing is potentially streamlining the process, so when someone comes before you, you don't have to go through that discussion. However, the trade-off is that you don't go through the discussion, so you're ceding some of that review authority to the staff to make at least that initial determination as to whether the materials are consistent with what the regulations are calling for or not. So be aware that it does potentially take some decisions out of your hands. It definitely does take some decisions out of your hands, puts it in the staff's hands. So that's the trade-off.
So here's my point. If we're going to define exactly what we want in terms of materials, whether they are real or synthetic, and they look alike, why are we letting them come back if they're inconsistent with that standard for a waiver? It's crazy. We should just say right out, this is what you're going to have to put on your building, And if it's not the real stuff, it's got to look like the real stuff, because that's the look we want. I mean, we're kind of wheedling around here. Why give the guy a waiver if it's inconsistent?
Well, that's up to the board. The board doesn't have to grant the waiver.
Well,
But
why
the-
do we even give him
Well, the
that?
regulations
Yeah.
call for the board to have that authority to grant waivers on a case-by-case basis. So it's, if you want to take waivers out of the mix,
That's-
I think that goes back to the discussion we were having earlier about enforcement. You either take away the option of the planning board to grant waivers, which, again, there's trade-offs to that too, because that kind of handcuffs you in terms of flexibility, looking at options where it might make sense to allow something that's not called for in the regulations. So you can go that route, or you leave it as is, which is the planning board has the ability to grant waivers on a case-by-case basis, and then it's up to the board to make the right decision when those waivers are requested.
I would add that the challenge of eliminating the waiver option altogether is that in the drafting of what's permissible, it doesn't necessarily give much shrift to new products that might come on the market. So it makes it much more difficult to draft something that is appropriately restrictive, yet sufficiently flexible. That's the art, as you know better than most. But I hear you fully in that, you know, if you're going to say what's permissible, you got to hold the line, with occasional exceptions maybe. But that's, you know, depending on how you want to draft it.
Well, if it's a green shutter, I'm not particularly interested in what it's made out of. And I understand stuff down by the beach might be made out of something. If it looks like a green shutter, you can make it out of cardboard as far as I'm concerned. But I think we need to really get a little more tough on this particular issue and say, this is the way it is, and if you don't like it, you got to do something else. I mean,
Well, do you think we should continue this to when we have a full board and discuss this further?
I,
I do.
I'm prepared to vote, but I would yield to your.
Is
full
the
board.
language drafted
Keep
for
in
the
mind,
proposed
we have 4
revision?
members, so one negative vote
Yeah,
kills it. So
but I'm just registering my concern about it, so I would be happy to wait until we have a full board.
yeah, all right, so let's continue this item.
Okay.
Do we need to make a motion to do that, or
Why don't you? Sure.
we have a motion to continue this item?
Motion made.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded to continue the consideration of amendments on exterior building materials for commercial buildings. Any discussion? Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That item is continued. The next item, also under 4G, is consideration of possible amendments to the Middletown Rules and Regulations regarding the subdivision and development of land regarding application review timeframes. Can you introduce that, Ron?
Sure. This one's, I think, a little more straightforward. This was discussed with the board and the solicitor. The current regulations have, or we try to keep the current regulations up to date with what the state statutes have for required review timeframes for subdivision applications. Unfortunately, over the past couple of years, those timeframes have changed due to changes in the statute, which requires updating the regulations. So inevitably, our regulations are often, and currently are, out of sync with what the statute requires, which is an issue. In that case, if our regulations are not consistent with the statute, then the statute is what governs, so we go by what the statute says in terms of the review timeframes. We discussed with the solicitor what the best option would be to address this going forward, and it was suggested, and what I've drafted is a change to the regulations that would simply, in all cases where timeframes are referenced in the regulations, it references the statute. So anytime the statute changes, our regulations are going to be referencing that statute. No need to constantly update the regulations. So that's basically what it is.
And that's the state statute. Is that
State
correct?
statute, yep.
So,
Any discussion?
Sounds good.
Sounds like a no-brainer. Sounds like a no-brainer. I have a motion to.
So what you would
adopt
be doing in this case is any change to the regulations requires a public hearing. So at this point, if you agree to go forward with this item, you would
Public
ask
hearing?
me to schedule a public hearing. And what I would suggest is we won't go ahead and schedule that public hearing until these other regulations amendments are addressed, because I think we can combine the public rather than having multiple public hearings, we can have a single public hearing to address these
sounds good.
items.
So set this aside to set up a public hearing as soon as we deal with the other two.
Sure.
Okay. The next item are updates. And I'd like to point out that in your package, you have a list of 20 items that the planning board has been dealing with or has dealt with and moved on to the next stage. So this is for the benefit of board members to see how these projects that we've worked on are progressing. Are there any comments on those?
Just that there are a lot of them.
Also, I assume there's nothing new with BRAC?
No.
Committee reports, Rural Village, Liz?
The subcommittee for the Rural Village District met, when did we meet, around the?
2 weeks ago?
2 weeks
Yeah,
ago?
Yeah.
And so what we are taking into consideration is something similar to, the Atlantic Beach District, where we're looking at an area along East Main Road at the entry into Middletown of taking a look at a group of properties that would be, would have, once again, like a limited business district that had certain uses were allowed and certain uses not allowed in order to keep the agricultural nature of that area, representing what Middletown's all about as people are entering into Middletown down the East Main Road. So it's creating a rural village district area where there's commerce and housing and associated agricultural-based businesses. And we will meet again in March or April, so we will let that will be out in the public when that rural village district subcommittee will be meeting.
Can I piggyback?
Yeah.
So the properties are the Vineyard and Brewery, the Shops Nursery, and Mr. Bichot's new motel. And what we simply did is they were all working on the use table. That's their homework assignment for our next meeting, is to define what they would like to see in that particular district and what they don't want to see. So that's...
And what would be appropriate?
Yeah.
We're looking for appropriateness.
And I would say the degree of difficulty in this particular effort is about 1 millionth what we're facing down at Atlantic
Yeah.
Beach.
Thank you. The next one is the Use Table Subcommittee, which will, I guess, now become the Atlantic Beach District Use Subcommittee. And Ron, you're going to schedule meetings for that. Tree Commission. EJ?
Yes, I'd like to give kudos to Karen Day, who is the chair of the Tree Commission. She and her group have been working with Middletown Valley Park, and they've done a great job in organizing all the trees, and each tree can cost up to $500 or more a piece. So when you're looking down into the Valley Park, just do a little bit of adding. And most of the trees have been purchased with grant money that Karen has been running after these various organizations to obtain funds. Of course, the town has given a certain sum, but there's a lot of individual work that goes into this committee, and I would like to also give kudos to Alan Kirby, who is our tree commission tree warden, and he has done a wonderful job giving a lot of his personal time, even to going out at midnight to chase away the deer that have been eating the bark on some of the trees, and then with his own funds putting up sticks around these trees. So again, please take note next time you go down High Street. And also, if you see any people walking their dogs, make certain they're carrying little bags with them, please.
What the tree commission does is really remarkable, I agree.
It is.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Our representative to Open Space and Fields Committee is not here tonight, so we'll move on after that. The Conservation Committee.
Conservation Commission did not have a meeting this past month, as they did not have any items on the agenda that they needed action, so
Okay,
nothing to report.
thank you. Upcoming meetings, we have a meeting scheduled on March 6th. It's a public hearing on proposed comprehensive plan future land use map amendments. And this is another example of where the planning board is working to gain consistency between zoning and the comprehensive plan. This whole effort has been addressing these discrepancies between the two and making changes to make them consistent. This, I believe, is our fourth and last meeting on a whole series of these discrepancies.
Yep.
And once we deal with this, will a request be made to the state to,
Well, they first, all the amendments will be forwarded to the town council for consideration.
go to the town council
Then
first?
if the town council adopts those amendments, then it goes to the state for approval.
Okay. And then we have our next regular meeting on March 13th. Is there anything else that board members would like to bring up?
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Motion is made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion's adjourned. Meeting's adjourned.
Whatever.
Right.